Hi, I'm Coral, an artist and an illustrator, and welcome back to my channel. It's a gloomy Wednesday afternoon, so I figured it was the perfect time to record a new video. And today I want to show you how I make my greeting cards. Previously made a TikTok about this, and a lot of people found it really helpful, so I figured I would make a full in-depth video, and hopefully it can be helpful to you too. So I first started making greeting cards back in 2021 when I first started this journey, and it was the first or one of the first products that I ever had in my shop along with art prints. And since then, I think my design process and my printing process have improved a lot. It's definitely a lot quicker now. When I first started, I was watching as many videos as I possibly could. I was researching whatever I could to try and figure out how to make greeting cards and how to make it work for the printer that I had, and then like the program that I was using, which mainly was Illustrator when I first started. So trying to figure all that out was really difficult. It took a long time. I made a lot of mistakes. I wish I had a video like this that would help me kind of bring me through the entire process, because there were a lot of videos that were helpful, but a lot of it is also, they were like different parts that were missing that I needed to figure out myself. So some people would show me how to print, or some people would show me, their favorite kinds of paper to use, different pieces, and I would just kind of have to like Frankenstein it together and make it make sense for me. So I hope this video is as helpful to you as it would have been to me back then if you're just starting out in your greeting card journey. But yeah, let's get to it. So jumping right in, the first thing that I do is figure out what I want to make, basically. So I'll brainstorm a lot of ideas. I'll usually do this in my sketchbook, write down trends or things that I want to draw. If I have like a phrase that I want to draw or include in some way, then I'll write those down. Then after that, I go ahead and kind of piece it all together. So I'll put together phrases or images that I want and then come up with like a final sketch and then move on from there. For the card we're making today, I'm choosing to do a graduation card with a pun built into it and then adding some text in the center. Once I have that all ready to go, then I'll kind of go into figuring out what kind of illustration or what kind of design this is going to be. So the way that I categorize it is it going to be a design that's design heavy and like text heavy? Is it going to be something that's just an illustration, or is it going to be a combination of both? If it's just design heavy and text heavy, then I know I'm going to mainly be using Illustrator just because it's a little more precise. I have most of my fonts in there and they're a lot easier to warp in different ways that I can't really do in Procreate. If I'm doing mainly illustrating, like hand-drawn stuff, then I'll use Procreate because it has more of a hand-drawn feel that I prefer in my illustrations. And I have a ton of brushes on there that I can't necessarily get in Illustrator. And if it's a combination of both, if it's gonna have text and illustration in it, then I know that I'll have to do a combination of both. So I'll have to use Procreate to make the actual illustration, and then I'll probably move it over into Illustrator and add the text afterwards. So that's kind of the way that I think about it, and it helps me kind of break it into chunks so I can figure out, okay, I need to do the illustration first in Procreate and then I need to move to Illustrator. Doing that just helps me understand the printing process a little bit better, because if the majority of my design is going to be in illustration, then I know I need to make my canvas the size of my final illustration, so then I can just add text on top. But if it's something where I'm just drawing like a small element in Procreate and then moving it over to Illustrator to finish the entire design, then I don't really have to be super precise about my canvas size. Yeah, it just helps me break it down and understand the entire process a little bit better. For this design, I'll be doing a combination of text and illustration, which means I'll be using mainly Procreate and then possibly Illustrator. I might hand letter the text instead, but I'll figure that out later. Choosing a canvas size is super important. You have to think ahead to what you'll be using the illustration for. For example, I make my own greeting cards at home, but I also intend on licensing these designs to other companies in the future. For myself, I make my greeting cards in a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch size. I've heard some people say that this is industry standard size, but I also know that bigger companies like American Greetings and Hallmark will use a typical 5 by 7 inch format. So if I intend on licensing these designs at some point, then I would rather make them a 5 by 7 inch format now and save some time for myself in the future instead of having to go back and resize all of them. This is another reason why the structure of your design is also important. Designs will almost always require a bleed, and a bleed is basically just extra space at the end of an artboard or a design that is meant to be cut off. It ensures a truly borderless design when the card is printed. So it's super important that the main elements in your design are centered or further away from the edges of the canvas. This will also make it easier to resize in the future and ensure there is room for a bleed. Some other important things to consider when setting up your canvases are your color space and DPI. There are two main types of color spaces, RGB and CMYK. RGB is used for designs that will be used on physical screens, so think like social media posts, websites, etc. And then CMYK is used for printing. But this is something that I do that doesn't necessarily follow the rules. I actually set up my canvases in RGB even though I'm printing the design. So I should be using CMYK, but I find that with my process, I'm still able to get favorable results that are pretty accurate when printing. Now, DPI stands for dots per inch, and you'll see that under the dimensions tab. This is going to determine how high quality or pixelated your design will be. Industry standard is usually 300 DPI, but that'll vary for each project. I typically like to use 500 DPI just to get my designs a little bit crispier. Keep in mind, the higher the DPI, the less layers you'll have to work with. I'm someone who likes to have a lot of layers available, but some people are comfortable with working less. For this design, I'll be using a 5x7 canvas. And what I actually want to do is size it up 2 times. That's something that I forgot to mention. I size up all my canvases by 2 to give me more options to repurpose the illustration in a bigger scale in the future. So think about like gift bags, posters, or stuff like that. So instead of 5x7, this is actually going to be a 10x14. And you'll see with the combination of my canvas size and then the DPI, my maximum layers has actually dropped to 25. So I might actually go in and change my DPI to 300. And I'm back to 79 layers. So you can just mess around with that and see what works best for you. I actually think I'm going to stick with 300 because it gives me more layers. And that's essentially everything that I do to create my Procreate file. Okay, that was a mouthful, but we're going to move on to illustrating and exporting. So once I'm done illustrating my design in Procreate, I'm going to export it as a PNG to my computer. I use a PNG because it's a higher quality file than a JPEG. It also has the ability to do transparency. So if you do need to export maybe just, let's say, the lamps with no background and no overlays, then you can do that with a PNG. So I've already done this, but my Illustrator file setup is pretty simple. I just use a basic 8.5x11 artboard and then use a 0.125 inch bleed. I still leave it on RGB color space and then I leave it on the highest 300 DPI. Okay, then what I'm going to do is drag and drop my image into Illustrator, and then you're going to go down to the corner and embed it. And then like I had mentioned, I did choose to hand letter the text instead of using fonts, so I really don't need Illustrator for anything other than just setting up the template. So what I'm going to do here is make a copy of the design, and then I'm going to crop this one to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch size. Okay, and so here it is cropped. I've already added guidelines halfway in each direction to my artboard, and I'm going to move over my cropped illustration and fit it right into that corner, but still give it a little bit of a bleed so that we don't have any white lines when we print. And then I'm going to put another one underneath. Then we're going to go up to File, Print, and this is the most important part. To understand what settings you'll need in order to print, you'll have to know what type of paper you're going to be using and what printer you're going to use. So this is the printer that I have. It's an Epson EcoTank 8550, and basically what that means is that instead of having cartridges, that it runs off of little ink tanks. And the paper I use specifically for greeting cards is the Red River 60-pound polar matte double-sided in an 8.5x11 size. They give you so much information about the paper type you have and your printer, what to use for media, all that good stuff. And it makes it a lot easier to understand your printer and your paper and how they work together. Once you know those two things, you can start adjusting your settings. For me, I just make sure that my printer is selected at the top. I make sure that I have the correct amount of copies and that the correct artboard is selected. I only have one artboard, so it's going to automatically print that. The only other thing I will change here is the scaling. I'll usually change it to fit to page. Then I'll scroll over to color management on the side, make sure that let Illustrator determine colors is selected. Printer profile is important. This is where your printer drivers are going to be. So I have to scroll down and find RR Polar Matte, which is right here. And then leave it on relative colorimetric and check this box. Then I'm going to click page setup and make sure your printer is selected. And for me, I'm printing on an 8.5x11 piece of paper I always choose borderless. Not every printer can do borderless, but if it can, definitely use it because that's going to ensure you don't have to make any extra cuts and that your cards are actually the correct size. And then I always leave it on portrait and 100% scaling. Then I'll click setup. And then from here, I'll only change the settings under printer options and then print settings. I choose rear paper feeder, premium presentation paper matte, color, and then I used to use Epson Vivid, but now I use Epson Standard. Leave it on quality, and that's pretty much it. This is where you'll have to do some trial and error to figure out what works best for you and what gives you the best result. Then you hit print twice, and out come my beautiful little cards. So once that's printed out, I'll basically end up with a piece of paper that has 2 squares on one side and then completely blank on the other side. This is where I'll take it over to my paper cutter and cut it in half basically. And so I have a little sticker that's on my paper cutter, so it helps me kind of push it up against the edge and it cuts it almost a perfect cut. After that, I'll go ahead and score the middle. Again, I use the ruler along the bottom edge to be able to figure out where the center is, and then I'll also use the grooves within my paper cutter to use as a guide for my bone folder. So I will line up the middle and then score the card all the way down, and I'll score the inside, not the outside, because once you fold it, it looks a little bit better. So I'll line up the edges once everything is done, and then I will slowly start to fold the card in half, and then I will gently use the edge of my bone folder to crease up the edge without trying to ruin it. I have messed up sometimes, end up ruining cards, but just be gentle with it and you'll be able to crease it. And once you have a solid fold, then you can go in a little bit rougher with your bone folder and really flatten out that crease. And that's it. You have your very own greeting card. That's pretty much everything. That is how I make my greeting cards. And again, this is just what works best for me. And you might find something that works better for you. But if you do have similar paper types or printers, I hope this helped. If you have any other questions, please leave them in the comments below and I will try and help you out and answer as many as I can. Let me know if you like this kind of video, if you want me to make more videos like this where I'm showing you my process on how I do certain things, or if you have suggestions for other videos, please let me know. I hope you enjoyed the video and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.